Welcome to Potter Revisited, episode 88. I'm Tori.
And I'm Shay.
Today we are jumping into chapter 28 of Goblet of Fire, The Madness of Mr. Crouch.
Or, as we like to call it, Percy Weasley's Boggart.
Harry decides to give Dobby his new socks that he bought him.
And Dobby's hyped. Dobby loves his new socks. And you know what? Good for Dobby. It's what he deserves.
Visiting the kitchens with the House Elves, Winky is still so very upset. She's just off in a corner, filthy, drinking butterbeer.
Which is alcoholic. No one mentions it, and you just assume the entire time butterbeer is like root beer, non-alcoholic.
Yeah, we had a huge discussion if butterbeer was alcoholic when we read Prisoner of Azkaban. We were just like, oh, it must not be alcoholic, but now apparently it is.
It's alcoholic, and they give it to 11-year-olds.
I guess it's kind of like those wine gums or kind of infused liquor chocolates that kids kind of eat because they have such low amount of alcohol in it.
I don't think they actually even have, it's this, I don't know, if it's enough to get a house elf drunk. I know they're small, but it should not be going to 11-year-olds. That's insane.
But the house elves, the way they treat Winky is so upsetting, I think.
Yeah, it really is upsetting.
Despite Winky being kind of annoying and everything, she's obviously very upset and kind of traumatized with how she was let go, and she can't adapt to this new life, and she's just very sad, and no one kind of takes, besides Dobby, is really doing anything to help cheer her up. They're just kind of put her away, and it kind of reflects how people treat those that aren't kind of following the status quo in society. If you're gonna act different, we just want to put you away in a corner and don't want you to see anyone or anyone to see the way you're acting.
It shows a lot about the house elves culture being very this is just what you do things. There's no part of their culture that accounts for feelings, which is so sad. And it's especially weird because the thing that has her upset is she was fired. She was unable to do what she sees as her purpose, which is serving the Crouches. And the other house elves all sort of ascribe to that belief. They seem to want to just serve and do what's wanted of them, and that's what they seem to value most right now, or what they've been sort of raised to believe is the norm. And so if anything, they should understand what she's going through a little bit. You know what I mean? She did everything she was supposed to, and then she was punished for it. They should be more I understand that now she's not doing what she's supposed to, but they should be empathetic because they would also hate it if they were told they weren't doing their jobs well. There's no empathy. And I think the thing I hate the most is that they're acting like she has no right to be unhappy.
Yeah.
And I kind of think the right to be unhappy is something we in society don't really talk about very often. I think the closest thing we have in our day-to-day lives is sort of being a woman in society and having some gross man tell you to smile because you aren't a full person and your emotions and experiences don't matter. You're there to be something to look at, an ornament on the shelf, and you need to smile in order to fulfill that need because no one cares what you're going through and no one cares that you have a whole life and experiences. Just smile and look pretty. And that's sort of how I feel for her. They're acting like she's not allowed to have feelings. She's not allowed or entitled to be upset. And I'm that is so heartbreaking and dehumanizing. It was dehumanizing enough for her to be let go from someone she was really loyal to and cared about. But then to have the people that are supposed to understand you the most and be able to relate to you the most invalidate you so much, it's really sad.
Yeah, even Hermione kind of loses it and tells all the house elves off, which, Hermione is trying her best, and obviously no one else is trying to, do stuff for the house elves, but it kind of shows that she goes about things the wrong way because she's trying to force them to see the way they're treated is bad, but if they have no context for how they're treated, it's their usual way, they can't relate to that. So it's kind of people coming in, being I'm going to fix things for you, but you're sit here being wait, but this isn't broken.
Yeah, you need to understand the culture before you can have any say. It's very much like that sort of white savior complex where people think they can come into other societies and completely, quote unquote, fix them without understanding what the people actually see as the issue, Yeah,
but they get kind of kicked out of the kitchen. But they're not going to be told they're being kicked out, but they're being kicked out. And Ron and Hermione are kind of like, snapping at each other. And Harry's just like, I'm over this. So he goes to hand out a box of food for Sirius, which is so nice.
Very kind. Get him some eclairs.
He's just hanging up in the hour because he doesn't want to deal with Ron and Hermione. And he sees Madame Maxine trying to speak to Hagrid again, which I thought was kind of interesting because we know that Hagrid was kind of put through the ringer with Rita Skeeter's article, and Madame Maxine kind of just like abandoned him. And now she's here right before the third task, being like, "Oh, hey, dude."
It's nice that Hagrid caught on to it, though. He's being dismissive. He knows that, like, she's just trying to get information about the tasks out of him, which, like, is good for Hagrid because sometimes he really misses things and he doesn't catch on to stuff like that. So I'm glad he, like, noticed it, realized it, and isn't going to let himself be taken advantage of.
Yeah. I had a lot of thoughts about this part, but the next morning, Hermione receives a bunch of hate mail from Rita Skeeter's article. And first of all, she's getting hate mail sent to the school. Isn't there like processes they should have to make sure, like she's not getting like curses or dangerous substances sent to her at a school?
I absolutely agree. Hogwarts should probably have some way to screen the mail at minimum for like poison and curses, especially like when Harry got the broom in third year. They like took the broom away when they found out about it and then checked it for curses. But like to me, there should be like without opening mail a way to like check if it's cursed. And it's weird that it isn't. Like, you can't read everyone's mail because that's illegal, but at least to remove the curses and poison and things like that, I think would be fair, seeing as how, it's a school. You should be able to, at least to some extent, know you're not putting your kids in danger. And if delivering the mail to them is risking their lives.
My other point was that it's kind of disgusting that adults who are reading this like article from this magazine are sending like hate and like dangerous substances and curses and stuff to a minor at a school.
Minus her being at a school when she receives it, this feels very real. Like, I remember when like Disney stars, specifically female Disney stars, started to become young adults and would like dress a little bit more like an adult as opposed to a child. The hate mail that adults, or like the posts and the opinion pieces that adults would post about like JoJo Siwa or whatever wanting to wear a crop top, and like Miley Cyrus wanting to do anything in the world, like horrible, horrible things they would say about these young women, them being adults saying this, and it's sad, but it feels very believable.
Yeah, I just feel that, like, even if there was a sliver of truth to what Rita wrote, like, Hermione is a normal 14-year-old girl, and if she was dating someone and then dated someone else, like, that's high school.
Yeah.
But, like, generally, like, you know what, her brain hasn't fully developed. If she's gonna, like, 2 times some guy, it sucks. It's life.
But it's her right as a teenager to make that poor choice.
Yes. But I do feel that, like, Hermione has a pretty strong sense of self at this point because despite getting all this hate mail, she doesn't really let it bother her. And it's really disgusting and prejudiced. Like, someone even tells her to go back where she came from, like, insinuating that she's not, like, a real witch. She doesn't let it affect her until she gets injured, obviously.
Yeah.
And she doesn't show it that affects her. And I feel like most teenagers would not be able to hold it together, getting like hate from people. It's like anonymous hate. Like back in the days when Tumblr was like big and you'd get like anon hate. Like, I feel like Hermione handles this quite well for someone who's so young.
Yeah, I remember I didn't get a lot of Tumblr hate because I was wonderful on Tumblr and everyone loved me. I did get like Formspring hate, like back when Facebook decided to have a fun app where you could anonymously ask people questions, and there was all brutal stuff about like horrible, like probably could criminally prosecute people for harassment level stuff.
Formspring was such a mistake.
Just created so children could harass each other. So I totally, it's just so real. Like it hits home, and like it hurt me, a lot of that stuff. There's some of the things that I got on there that sometimes I still bring up in like therapy. To this day as a 30-year-old woman, I'm like, this person said this to me on Formspring when I was like a child, and sometimes it still feels like it's real life. Like sometimes I still think about that, and sometimes that still hurts me, and I wonder if what they said to me is true. And like, it's horrible, but it's real life, So I definitely can imagine how much some of this would stick with Hermione if it pertained to something she was actually sensitive about. I think she is really strong in that because it doesn't really pertain to any of her core defining traits or something she's sensitive about, she really does overcome it. And I think it sort of slides right off of her mostly. But I can imagine um, some of the things they could have said if they had known her as a person would have really screwed with her, especially knowing that Hogwarts doesn't have a therapist.
But Ron actually points out of like what the she sent like a substance in the mail that burns her hands. So that's fun. That's great. Thanks, Dumbledore.
That also hits home, like, it's kind of like an acid attack, which is a very, very common way that people try to like punish women.
Yeah.
And that's pretty horrendous that it's such a real thing in the real world. You know what I mean? That actually does happen to women who have done nothing wrong.
Yeah, but Hermione has to go to the hospital until she misses her classes, and especially Hagrid's class, because Hagrid kind of planned a new lesson. He's kind of got his swing back and things, because he taught them unicorns, but he wasn't really into that because, they're not dangerous or cool. But Hagrid makes a lesson, which is like really interesting because he has Nifflers that are a pretty cool magical creature, and he creates an interactive lesson that all the students really like. Harry says it's like the best class they've ever had with Hagrid. So he's kind of finding like, his like middle ground, I think, with teaching, where it's not like a crazy animal it's not a crazy creature like the Scroots, but not like completely boring. It's kind of in the middle there.
It's a real animal, not something he's bred that they're never going to have to see, therefore have no reason to know about. And it's an interesting creature. And the way he hides gold coins, and then everyone picks a Niffler, and the Niffler that gets the most coins wins. Like he gamifies the class. It's interesting. The animal does something neat but isn't dangerous. Honestly, they sound so cute.
I feel like as a kid, I kind of imagined Nifflers kind of like small dogs, like black Labradors, but with like snouts. But I think in the Fantastic Beasts movie, they look more kind of like...
Platypus?
Yeah, like a platypus. So that kind of threw me off.
I guess so, because they're sort of sniffing out the corn. So I would understand wanting to picture like a dog creature for sure.
Ron wins the class game, so he wins the most gold coins. But we find out that Leprechaun Gold, which Harry won at the beginning of the book at the Quidditch Cup, that Leprechaun Gold disappears after a few hours. So Ron is really in his head because he realizes that like he thought he was paying Harry back, but he actually didn't, and Harry didn't even notice the gold left. And obviously Harry had a lot going on, but Ron's in his head being like, I can't believe you have so much money that you don't even notice it goes missing. So I find it like really interesting the way the Weasley kids really deal with the financial insecurity that they face, because we see it a lot from Ron's perspective, and Ron's a very already insecure character who really internally struggles with his feelings. He has really big feelings of inferiority and sense of self. So when he really internalizes and struggles with any kind of instance where money comes up. And we also have Fred and George, who we see in this book, and especially in Order of the Phoenix, where they make a more proactive approach to their financial insecurity, where they're going to make their own money and forge their way, but they make their own business, and they're doing this despite their family not always supporting them, especially Mrs. Weasley, and Percy obviously looks down at them for this, and no one really thinks they're going to do anything, and obviously they're very successful later on. And obviously we have Percy, who follows in his father's footsteps to join the ministry, but instead of being like Arthur, who joins a department that he's passionate about, and it's more just like a job, calling that he's passionate about, but obviously does not make money. Percy sees it as kind of like a stepping stone where he's just going to climb the corporate ladder. So he has like the prestige and also like probably the financial backing to be secure in that way. And we see that Percy does blame Arthur when he leaves Order of the Phoenix, because he kind of calls Arthur out, being like, the reason we are not well off is because you did not do your job and get promoted in the ministry. It's because you're not ambitious is the reason why we're like this. And people look down at us. And Percy kind of like looks down at his father for this too. And we don't know a lot about Bill and Charlie, like as like children and how they kind of dealt with this. But we do know that Bill and Charlie both took jobs and career paths that led them outside the country. So maybe that could also lean into like how they looked for work and how to kind of like how they view money as well.
I feel like Charlie's job sounds like the dream job someone grows up fantasizing about, and I think they generally don't pay as well, like actual fantasy dream jobs, with an exception of like sports. So I feel like he probably doesn't get paid a lot, but it's his dream job and he just doesn't buy a lot of things. I feel like for sure Bill works for a bank, so regardless of what his position is, I think he probably makes decent money. But I also think because those two are the oldest, they had less financial trauma because even if Mr. Weasley made the same amount of money his whole life, there were less mouths to feed. So I think it was probably not as financially constraining for them growing up, at least for the first few years, because there weren't that many. Even after Percy, it's still not a crazy amount of children to have, and the money spreads a little easier.
It's definitely a big theme throughout, especially for Ron, throughout the books of how he kind of manages kind of like that aspect of his life.
It's interesting though, like they're financially aware because like they're not wealthy, but like they can afford to eat. They have all like their needs met. They just don't have a lot of like spare, like fancy things or spare money or like luxuries.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely kind of feels like the kind of situation where like if one of them had had to spend a summer with Harry at the Dursleys, who are like like average income, I think they would realize pretty quickly how maybe not having as much money isn't the worst thing. You know what I mean? But I think it's hard to understand that when you can't experience what it's like to have a little more money, but a lot less like love and support.
Yeah, I feel like Ron kind of sees that, like the way Harry would give up a lot of things to, like, because Harry's only rich because his parents died. So he definitely sees that. But I feel like, especially growing up at the age they are now, you see people have things. And I feel like that's the age where, like, having, like, a dress for a dance or having the latest, like, cell phone or something, that's something you fit in with. And, like, the things you wear and the things you have, like, as, like, a high school student, that's how you kind of identify with your peers.
There were definitely times where I felt like my identity was invalidated by the fact that I couldn't afford things, especially when you're like trying to figure out who you are as a teenager and you're almost looking for those labels to say like, oh, I'm this girl. I'm the girl who likes this, I'm the girl who does this. It's really hard to see people being able to afford things, especially if you think you'd like appreciate them more because you don't really know how much someone else appreciates something. It's hard, especially with things that like really relate to your core. So Ron, who like loves Quidditch, seeing Harry be able to afford a nice broom and things, I'm sure it hurts.
But moving on from the Weasleys and their financial woes, Hermione is trying to, like, eat her dinner with her swollen hands, and she's had enough. She's coming for Rita Skeeter.
She's literally going to destroy her. Like I wouldn't mess with Hermione. I think Rita Skeeter should be afraid, and I don't think she knows she should be afraid. She doesn't pay attention to Hermione enough to realize she screwed up. She made a horrible mistake, and Hermione's going to end her, and she should.
It's funny too because Hermione has this vendetta, and then Harry and Ron are like, "We have no time to help you with this," and she's like, "I don't want your help. I'll do it by myself."
What can you guys offer me that I can't do for myself? Like,
If Hermione's like side quests, she does them all by herself, and Harry's like, "How do you have time to do this?"
I also really love Ron being very sassy when Hermione's like, "Don't worry, I'll handle it myself." And Ron's like, "Who's betting she comes back with I hate Rita Skeeter badges?" And I'm like, "Oh, Ron."
I mean, I'd wear one.
I think it is really, really heartbreaking for Hermione how rude Molly is.
Yes.
Like sending her an obviously much smaller and less meaningful Easter gift. Like I think that's a really petty thing for a grown woman to do, especially one that we all really love. Like that is super childish. But I also think what that does say is that every Easter, Molly not only sends her kids chocolate, but she also sends their friends chocolate. Like the norm is they all get the same size chocolate. So like it's really nice to imagine normally she sends their friends treats. I'm like, that's such a nice, like that's like something your mom would do, I feel like.
Yeah. As we discussed last episode, yeah, it does really hurt that Mrs. Weasley believes Rita's article and subconsciously, or maybe not subconsciously, punishes Hermione because of it. Because she knows from the beginning of this book that Rita makes stuff up, but it doesn't stop her from mistreating Hermione. And even if this was true, like we said before, Hermione's a child. Like,
she's allowed to make somewhat silly life choices.
Yeah, and I feel like it feels especially icky because Mrs. Weasley is like really the only mother figure in the series.
Sometimes Minerva, but mostly just Miss Weasley.
Yeah. Molly is like the quintessential like mom character.
Yeah, she's the loving and nurturing mother.
But then she's also a character who has flaws, and I feel like this is one of them. of the way she treats the boys versus the girls, because we also see how she treats Fleur and Half-Blood Prince when she's engaged to Bill, and how kind of like just really mean and terrible she is because she doesn't like Fleur, because of preconceived notions she has about Fleur. She doesn't really know Fleur, doesn't get to know her. But it's also hard because, like, she knows Hermione, yet she believes this willy-nilly, and it's like, you've known this girl for 4 years.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where like mothers sometimes are overly biased about their children and want what they think is best for their kids. And so in her mind, Harry is one of her children because he needs a mother and she is one. And so anything that she sees as like not good enough for one of her boys or mistreating one of her boys is like a deep offense to her. And like even though Fleur obviously kind of sounds like a cat, she's great at magic. Everyone describes her as unbelievably beautiful and obviously she's super into Bill. Miss Weasley's idea of what Bill would want is someone quirkier and someone more like down to earth and someone, you know what I mean? And Miss Weasley has this preconceived notions of like this fancy blonde French lady must not treat my son well, must think she's too good for him, you know? And like it's very much a thing that I'm sure a lot of parents have for their kids where like what you think is best for them and what you want for them might not actually be what they want for themselves or what is best for themselves. And so she just sort of boy moms the situation
Oh,
and is
gosh.
just like, yeah, it's just kind of what she does, right?
Yeah.
Anyone who isn't perfect for my sweet, pleasant boy is a terrible choice and a terrible person, and it's over dramatic and it's too much, and she shouldn't be doing it. But I think that's sort of where it comes from.
We also get Percy's letter that they sent off about Mr. Crouch with Mrs. Weasley's Easter collection. And Percy seems very irritated in this letter. It's not very long. And obviously he's just kind of like, stop asking me that Mr. Crouch, he's fine. He's sending in instructions each day. He's just very tired and overworked. He's taking some time off. Leave me alone.
Yeah, talking the company line, as it were.
I feel like Percy is just very irritated because obviously he's probably getting a lot of questions from a lot of different people, probably his family, also people from the ministry, like what's going on with Crouch.
The media.
Percy likes being like responsible and having kind of that like leadership role, so he doesn't want to give it up either. So I could see it'd be really annoying that he has all these people asking him questions, but also his younger brother. It's like, what right do you have?
Yeah, I'm sure sometimes he interprets them asking, where's Crouch? What is Crouch doing? As people saying, you're not good enough to do this. You can't handle this. You need him.
Yeah, exactly.
And Percy's like, no, this is my opportunity to show how much I can do on my own. So every time someone asks, even if they're just genuinely curious or Harry and Ron trying to understand next level magic plots, they definitely, to him, it's a slight on what they see him as capable of, you know? This is his opportunity. This is his window to prove himself and like step up the ladder quicker than traditional, you know?
But we get the introduction to what the third task is going to be. So they're taken to the Quidditch pitch, and I just love Harry and Cedric have this visceral reaction to when they see like the hedges on the Quidditch pitch, and they're like, what did they do to our Quidditch pitch?
I think this reminds me of I'm a Montreal Canadiens hockey fan, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, and I went and did a tour of the Bell Center once back when I was like being a tourist basically in my own city. They were doing a concert in the Bell Center that night, and they had rolled up the Stanley Cup banners so they weren't hanging down over the concert, and I felt grossed out. I was like, that's so rude. Like, why do they think some band coming here or some singer coming in here to perform deserves to have those banners that those teams fought and earned rolled up? Like, how dare you? Like, I was like, and so that's exactly what this reminds me of. Just like, how dare you? Like,
but after they're kind of introduced to what the third task is going to be, Crumb asks Harry for, a private word. And it's just this whole scene of Crumb and Harry getting Harry over Hermione. I just wish this had been the movie. I think there's a lot of humor that there could have been in it. And the idea of like little 14-year-old Harry talking to this 18-year-old Quidditch star, and it's just about Hermione.
I also think it's really cute how low-key flattered Harry is that Crumb would even see him as an equal, like someone who could who would be an equal in someone's eyes. Like he's like, how could he possibly imagine a girl wanting me instead of him? Like, has he met himself? Has he met me? Like Harry's like so caught off guard and like, oh, he thinks. Like, like Victor Crumb, super badass Quidditch guy, he thinks I'm all right.
I think it really shows how serious Crumb is about Hermione, because he's kind of seeing all these articles about Harry and Hermione also talks about Harry a lot too, and Harry's like, yeah, we're friends. And so like he's trying to get like what her deal is, because he's really serious about her.
I also really like that Crumb tells Harry he liked his flying, like compliments Harry's flying, because that's got to feel so good to hear from like the guy that you think is like the best in the world Quidditch player. He thinks you're pretty okay. Like this is the type of thing that Snape would have hated. He'd be like, God damn it, his ego doesn't need this, you know? But I think maybe Harry did kind of need it.
I also like that Crumb does not even consider Ron as an option. Joke's on him.
Because no one started an article about Ron. You know what I mean? I'm sure Crumb would have been just as like, Harry, is your friend Ron in love with Hermione? Are they dating? Like, if it had been about Ron, you know? Because it's not about Harry. It's not about Ron. It's about Hermione, you know? It could have been anyone, and Crumb would have been like, give me the lowdown.
But they're interrupted with, like, kind of their conversation because a wild Crouch appears. We'll talk about Crouch a bit later, but very dramatic. But kind of like regarding the Crouch kind of appearing situation, Harry is just kind of like, obviously he wants to talk to Dumbledore, so Harry is just like, oh, come with me and I'll bring Dumbledore. And I'm just wondering, it's too bad Harry doesn't have like the magic to be able to bring him to the castle. But Hagrid's castle is like Hagrid's castle. Hagrid's cabin's right there because they're just by the Beauxbatons carriage. I'm like, why couldn't he have gone to get Hagrid? Hagrid could have like manhandled them to the castle.
Yeah, I think maybe that's just not the type of situation. Like he's thinking of like the next, like the end result, which is Dumbledore can solve everything. He's not able to slow down and think of like a more convenient way to get the between steps resolved. Because like, yes, get Hagrid, have Hagrid bring him, all go together is a good idea. But his brain is just like, Dumbledore is what we need. So getting Dumbledore must be like, I must go get Dumbledore. That is the only way to acquire Dumbledore to solve this problem. You know, it's just like not thinking it through. And in the moment, to be fair, I get that. I really get that.
Yeah, I want to give Snape a sucks point for not believing Harry and trying to like stop him from getting Dumbledore. Annoying.
Like, I think at the very beginning when Harry's just frantically knocking on the door, I can understand being like, dude, he's the headmaster of the school. Like, you're just being ridiculous if you think every time something that happens that bothers you, you should run and get him. And then once Harry says, no, there's something wrong with Crouch, then Snape should have been like, okay, that sounds like a serious problem. All right, then, you know? Like, fine to come from it from a place of, oh, you're just a brat and everything that happens to you think is important. But once he realizes it actually is important, I think he probably should have got his shit together.
Yeah, Snape's coming from, obviously, a meeting with Dumbledore. And I feel like because Dumbledore gaslights him all the time, that maybe, and Snape complains about Harry all the time, he's probably just very, like, irritated.
Yeah, it's almost like Dumbledore primes Snape up to extra hate Harry sometimes. You know what I mean? Like...
Yeah. Yeah.
Snape's like, maybe we shouldn't get him maybe killed for a tournament. Can we bring that up again? And Dumbledore's like, no. It's totally fine.
We know that, like, Snape is protecting Harry, and him and Dumbledore have these secret meetings where Dumbledore kind of gaslights him, and Snape complains, and then having to see, like, the person that he's, like, in this all for, and it's just, like, and he's complaining about something. But still, it's pretty serious things, Snape.
I do understand, like, Harry in this moment, because I hate when something is serious and urgent, and you're like, we have a problem, I need to get here, and someone's like, what's going on? Let's talk about it. What, like, whenever someone tries to, like, slow you down when something is urgent, and you have to be like, you being fully aware of what's happening will not solve the problem. We need to get to the person who can. Sorry that you feel entitled to know all the details, but it's not going to help us right now. Just follow me. Like, I understand that.
When you're trying to get an adult to help you and, like, kind of don't believe you, and they're just like, oh, you're just being silly as a child, like, it's not that important. You're like, yes, this is urgent.
It's like one of my worst fears that I get, like, heart palpitations when I think of, like, something urgent and time sensitive, and you're like, it's an emergency, we have to do the thing, and someone's like, why? What thing? What's going on? How's it going? What'd you have for lunch? And you're just like,
no. After Victor it gets attacked and Karkaroff's, like, brought over, I do think Karkaroff, despite him being, like, really annoying and dumb, he has a point from his perspective that things do seem very suspicious, that, Dumbledore now has 2 champions in the tournament, and now his student has been attacked by one of the tournament's, like, organizers.
Yeah, tell us us.
But, he actually spits at Dumbledore, and Hagrid's just like, fuck that, and, like, launches him into a tree by, like, his neck.
Yeah.
So it's, like, it's kind of like that Robbie Coltrane thing, like, never insult Dumbledore in front of me. And I do like they kind of show this with Harry at the end of, like, Deathly Hallows, where, like, I think one of the Death Eaters spits at Mini G, and Harry's like, I'm gonna torture the fuck out of you, never do that again.
I like that we've all committed to calling her Mini G.
I was gonna type McGonagall, but it's too long, and I'm just like, yeah, we know what we talk about.
I also can't spell it for the life of me. I'll never spell it right, and there's nothing that could be done about it. Mini G is just how it is, you know? There's only so much we can do. I also think like this is a really bad moment for Hagrid, and not yeeting Karkaroff up a tree because he totally deserved that, and I'm fine with it. But like he starts saying some like really not good things, super duper generalizing statements, and it's an awful lot of saying that like all foreigners can't be trusted just because like Karkarov did one untrustworthy thing and he has personal feelings about Madame Maxine, but like it is so very, very uncool of him, and it's like it's xenophobic. And it's kind of a shocker to see that come from a character who's supposed to be so lovable. Like especially Hagrid, who like a key point of his character is he's someone who knows how it feels to be judged for being different, you know? Like it's super hypocritical of him to say like these two people visiting from abroad did something I didn't like. Therefore, should just send all these visitors back because they're not from here. And it's just like, whoa, that's like such a like
Generalization, yeah.
and it comes from like it comes out so quickly and it's so instantaneously harsh and aggressive. Like it's one of those things where like before we knew a lot about the author, looking back, a moment like this coming from a character that we're supposed to love so abruptly and never really being addressed is kind of like,
Side eye.
yeah, exactly. I think it's may say a little bit about the author.
I do think, like, in the series, we haven't really seen Hagrid, like, angry or kind of, like, his darker sides because he's usually such, like, comic relief, but also just, like, he's just the sweetest, nicest guy.
Also, he's a sad drunk and not an angry drunk, and he's usually drunk. So
yeah, he's just very sensitive. And I feel like what happened with his, like, backstory being outed and, you know, having feelings for someone and then obviously then kind of, like, throwing it back in your face. He's just very hurt. And I just feel like hurt people, when something happens, it's like this happened and then they kind of generalize it. So it's like men that have breakups and they're just like all women are terrible because this one woman was terrible to me.
yeah.
And so he obviously changes his tune later on, but now he's just like Madame Maxine was bad to me. So all of these foreigners are bad to me, even though Harry's like, hey, Crumb's cool. And he's like, no, he's not. But moving into the Barty Crouch of it all. Barty Crouch appears in the wild and
all like disheveled and scruffy and confused, disoriented.
I get the movie had a lot going on because there's a lot of different subplots in this book. But I just feel like this would have been such an interesting scene, especially after like the kind of comic relief scene of Crumb kind of sizing Harry up and kind of interrogating him. And like they're kind of like really getting along and everything. And all of a sudden Crouch comes out like all disheveled, all crazy. He's speaking kind of like, he's kind of not completely lucid.
And the actor who plays him is very, I think, quite talented. And I think he could have played this scene off very well.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, Barty's in the woods being absolutely unhinged and disheveled. And I mean, not looking smart, logical, well put together, or professional. And to be honest, this may just be Percy Weasley's Boggart. This might just be his absolute worst fear. Someone he admires, respects, and works for. And his career is tightly wound to the reputation of being like this in the woods. I'm just saying, you know, they should have maybe tried a ridiculous. Just giving it a go just in case, you know? But we get a lot from Barty's sort of unhinged rambling. Like, he's just dropping the foreshadows, you know? He mentions his son. He mentions Voldemort getting stronger. He apologizes, which is very important. And he lays it all out. And he only kind of mixes in some random stuff, like for Percy, giving him instructions, and then like talking about how great his son's grades were. And I feel like messages like this feel like they should have led to like better results if the adults had any critical thinking skills. Like Harry's disoriented, he's had a rough time, he's a little bit thrown off, but like these are the kinds of specific things that like you should be able to tell to the adults, and they should be able to say, okay, talking about his son's grades, probably not that important. We can try and remember what things he was saying to imaginary Percy may be important, but apologizing for something, along with talking about, you know, something his son did, along with Voldemort getting stronger, are those connected? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like a little bit of brain work from some adults might have come in handy in this moment. But again, critical thinking skills are not the strong suit of most of the adults.
In this series, yes.
I also think it's interesting that Crumb is so rattled, you know, big, strong, 18-year-old professional athlete Crumb. And I think it's because he's clearly a very good and talented wizard. Like, he got into the tournament, he's been doing well. But I think he's only really ever had to use his skills in structured settings like tournaments, Quidditch games, the classroom. So using them in the middle of the forest is a foreign concept, and he's just entirely out of his element, you know? But Harry, on the other hand, is kind of used to being attacked and in real world danger. Like, he's never entirely unprepared to be in danger. He's learned dangers everywhere. He knows he needs to be ready at a second's notice and be able to go from like casual chat to like doing defensive magic and being ready to protect himself. And it just shows like Harry really learned that. He's really quick on his feet when something hits the fan. He's immediately ready to respond. And like maybe he doesn't always do the most thought out response, but he's always ready to act immediately. And like he's good in an emergency. He might not do the most clever, well thought out response, but he has a response and it always gets him in the right direction of a resolution, you know? And it just says something, you know, about kind of how sad it is that Harry has to be this way, but like also how impressive it is because another very good, slightly older, stronger, bigger wizard who's also very talented just like has never had to live that life, has never had to see an opportunity to be attacked everywhere he goes. It's very, I think, a very key moment in reminding us who Harry is and what makes Harry a great wizard. Not how strong he is, not how many spells he knows, obviously, not how good he is at all the spells he knows. It's really just Harry has spent his whole life understanding that he needs to be ready, and he is.
Yeah, but we kind of leave the chapter off where they arrive, but obviously Crouch was gone and everything, and Moody goes in to look for him in the forest. Red flag.
Good old Moody. Well, I mean, to be fair, he is the person you would want to do that. You're like, oh, the defense against the dark arts teacher who tracks down bad wizards should probably be the one to defend us and track down this wizard who did a bad thing, you know? Like, it checks out, but it is sus. I wonder if he has like a boot for his peg leg when he's in the forest, or if it just slides deeper and deeper into the mud, you know? I have questions about.
Yeah, it's like heels in the grass.
Yeah, I hope he has a boot for his peg.
Yeah, we kind of ended the chapter off on kind of like a cliffhanger because we don't know what happened with Mr. Crouch. He's missing. Hagrid's like spewing off some like
offensive jargon.
Do you have any final remarks before we wrap up?
1, you shouldn't be giving alcohol to 11-year-olds. Do better, Hogwarts. 2, Miss Weasley really needs to behave like an adult and not a child and not bully children. Or I guess passive-aggressive is a better way to refer to what she did to Hermione. Because, like, she didn't send her hate mail. She just sent her a smaller gift, you know?
Yeah, she didn't give her nothing either. She gave her some things.
She didn't forget her. She consciously chose to demote her and made sure she knew about it, you know, which is passive aggressive and petty and not cool from an adult to a child. And I know that's hypocritical coming from the queen of the Snape train. I am the engineer of the Severus Snape train. Choo choo. So yeah, no, that's just who I am. I can't help myself. I'll talk about it in therapy.
Yeah, I just mostly think I'm just ready for Rita Skeeter to get what's coming to her because Hermione is on it now and she's unhinged and she's not ready for what's gonna happen. But definitely love the character growth of just like how sure of herself Hermione is, but we have poor Ron who's just very insecure and in his head. And obviously, there's just a lot of scenes that, especially getting into the later half of the book, that I wish were in the movies.
I think it's Women's Day today also. So shout out to Hermione Granger. She's a hell of a woman.
Happy International Women's Day.
May you all be smart, clever, and incredibly dangerous to those that piss you off.
And lock people you don't like into jars.
May you all have enough jars for all of your enemies.
Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Potter Revisited, and we'll be back next time to discuss Chapter 29 of Goblet of Fire, The Dream. If you like this episode, you can rate it or leave a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
Please do. We get no mail. It's really sad. Drop some owl post.
You can also reach us on social media at Potter Revisited and email us at potterrevisitedpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.